Hello, everyone. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Good? Okay, welcome to this beautiful space, and I'm so grateful to be here. My name is Bayo Akomolafe, and I'm here with my daughter. That's my daughter there, Alethea. She's 9 years old, and she's wiser than her years. And she said she wanted to join me on this trip. My whole family is here with me. And we've enjoyed Estonia. I know how to say tere now. And I can introduce myself. I think Minu Nimi on Bayo Akomolafe. Did I get it? Did I get it? Good. So I'm close. And I will keep learning about this magical, animist, beautiful country. Before we get started, because I come from a culture that is very, very imbricated and entangled in relationality, how we craft sociality is with the rituals and the fascinating technology of hugging. So I'm going to ask us, as a ritual, if you don't mind, to rise up on your feet and find two persons and greet them by hugging them, no matter how tired or exhausted you are. So everyone stand up from your comfort and find two persons and say, welcome, hello, tere.
Welcome.
Thank you, brother. Yes, my friend. I haven't seen you in a long time. Thank you. It makes it feel better, doesn't it? So I just have about this red glowing font on my screen. It's telling me I have 28 minutes and 13 seconds. And I was just telling my brother here, Waim, that it'll be impossible for me to break down this concept of the Paraterranean in 2 days. So I'm just going to rush through it. Well, not kind of rush through it, but I'll say a few words about it, and then we get on our way. Just to open the space for a consideration of what I call the Paraterranean. I'm here to speak about politics. I'm here to speak about emancipation. I'm here to speak about possibilities for rethinking human relationships with the world at large. I'm here to speak about the Anthropocene. But everything I say is partial. It's not a complete or encyclopedic analysis of world crisis. It's only a gesturing, as dance is a gesture with ecology. It's a movement with space, okay? So let's go. I was grateful to have a one-on-one conversation with my new brother, Hassel, who's, of course, a widely known philosopher. Yes, please, put your hands together for him. I heard. And we walked this park, and he took me around, and we had conversations about magic and rationalities and tricksters. And then he introduced me to the trickster from Estonia called Vanapagan. Did I correctly pronounce it? Vanapagan, the old pagan, right? And he told me a fascinating story that immediately resonated because I come from a culture of tricksters as well, okay? So you know this story. I don't need to tell it to you. You probably have heard this multiple times. It's the story of grandfather, I think, the creator, who creates the world. But the world is flat, right? Everything is flat. And Vanapagan, on the other end, hatches this agreement with grandfather to, add a little bit of salt to his creation, a necessary imperfection. And how he does it is by, what does he do? Does anyone know? By squeezing the flatness, and so introducing hills and valleys and grooves and rivers, the imperfection to the flatness, the crease to modernity. He does this by squeezing flatness. And I like that idea of introducing necessary imperfections and how that gives us life. Because let me tell you a quick story about our own trickster. I mean, he's not exactly good looking, but tricksters are not supposed to be. His name is Eshu, okay? Eshu, unfortunately, when the Christian missionaries came to Nigeria, they named him the devil, okay? They needed a word for the bad guy, the Satan in the Bible. So they just took this guy's name. I don't think he minds because he's a trickster. He's probably thinking, yeah, okay, devil, let's see how that goes. That's what tricksters do. But this is the fascinating story about tricksters in Nigeria that connects us to Estonia. Because according to the Yoruba cosmology, the story of creation, when everything started, a powerful deity called Obatala descended from a crack in the sky with a spider's web. So the original Spider-Man, came down through the heavens and then started to build everything, land and hills and rivers and fish, and then finally humans. And as he was building humans, Eshu gave him palm wine. Do you know what palm wine is in Estonia? It's very intoxicating. It's natural. It comes from the palm tree, and we tap it all the time. It's called palm wine. It's really strong alcoholic drink. It's very local. And he gave him palm wine, and so as a result of that, Obatala started to make disabled people, right? The necessary imperfection that he introduced to humanity was Eshu's trick, right? And so the creator became the patron of all disabilities. And so in Yoruba culture, we don't think of disability as less than. We think of disability as the excessiveness, the abundance, the trickster coming to play. Okay? Why am I telling you stories about tricksters? It's because I think we need something of a trick to address our modern civilizational crises today. We need the tricksters. We need Vanapagan. We need Eshu. We need Loki. We need those guys to address the crises of today. Let me tell you a story that you probably already know. It's one that is quite at the heart of the climate chaos crisis. You probably know this already. So here's what I'm starting with. There's life in the crises. When Vanapagan squeezes modernity and the flatness, within those folds, I think there's a politics that is calling on every one of us to participate in. That the flatness that modernity is an impoverished flatness. And we're being invited to play again in the folds, the creases. There's strange life in the bumps and grooves and creases of the public order. Okay. So let's start with that flatness. That flatness is the Anthropocene. That flatness that grandfather created, that Vanapagan disrupted, that flatness is the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene, who knows? Everyone knows. But who can offer here? I'm very participatory, hope you don't mind. Who can offer here for 10,000 euro, which will come from him, who can tell me one sentence about the Anthropocene? What is the Anthropocene? What have you heard about it? Brilliant people here. You probably have written encyclopedia and books about the Anthropocene. Anyone here? Don't be shy. I'm not shy. Anyone? Anthropocene? So human dominance, the dominance of the human. Thank you. 10,000 euro. Anyone else? Anyone else? She's worth it, yes. More, she's worth more than that. Anyone else? Anyone, one story that, someone said what? Stupidity. That's a good one. Someone should write an essay about Anthropocene as stupidity. It makes sense. Stupidity is like the imperviousness, the resistance to the wisdom of the world. So yes, in some sense, it is stupidity. The industrial is impervious to the life-giving energies of the world. So yes, the Anthropocene. So the Anthropocene is flat. It doesn't know how to listen to ecology. It doesn't know how to listen to ants. It doesn't know how to listen to trees. It doesn't know how to dance and weave its body through the creases of multiple or multi-species ecologies. It doesn't know how to do that. It only knows roads and highways and parking lots and growth and development and GDP and what else, Peter? What else does it know? All the what? My daughter is here. All the shit. It knows all of that. Let's go ahead, okay? So this is just some more about the Anthropocene. It's not just the geological weight of the Anthropos. The Anthropos is the human, okay? The human is the Anthropos, and the Anthropos is not just Vime, not just our bodies, it's the territory we're building together, right? Bodies are not disconnected from their ecologies. In fact, our bodies, the way we habitually see our bodies as separate from land, as separate from processes, as separate from viruses, as separate from microbial life forms, as separate from fungi, that is modernity's trick. That's the flatness. But the Anthropocene is that, but it's not just that. It's not just the Christianization of Estonia in the 13th century under the Teutonic Order. I've been reading about that. We visited a museum today, right? The Danish expansionism flattened Estonia. It wanted it to be amenable for the fetish and the rise of the individual who is amenable for salvation and sin and all of that. Right? That's the Anthropocene as well. It's not just the loss of biodiversity. It's not just climate chaos. It's not just the expansion of the Sahara Desert, right, in West Africa. It's not just the threat of fascism. Did anyone here, I doubt it, but did anyone here watch Donald Trump on CNN yesterday? Did you watch him? And people like, someone said something? Right. People were cheering Donald Trump, right? After everything that everyone has been through. He's more likely than anyone else in American politics at this time to win the presidency again, right? Why do people keep choosing their chains? Why do people keep selecting and electing their oppression? That was a question that Deleuze and Guattari and all those philosophers asked all the time. Why are we stuck? Why are we aroused by the strong man? Right? The Anthropocene says something about that. The conditions of how we live and experience each other is trapped in what we call the Anthropocene. It's not just the shrinking of the citizen, it's much more. Here's my thesis. One of the things I like to say about the Anthropocene, it's our stuckness. It's how we're trapped, right? Has anyone here read the IPCC report, the 6th iteration, the recent one? Your hand is up. Your hand is up. Someone stood up. Probably she wrote it. Okay, no, you're just going to the toilet. Okay. Anyone else? You've read the IPCC report? The summary. Of course, the summary is they've not only made summaries and different documents, they've actually made cartoons just to break it down for everyone to read or to have access to. The summary of the IPCC report is grim. It's that we are unlikely to make it, that we are already about to breach 1.5 Celsius degrees global average temperatures. And that means that we are going to witness suffering on a large scale. Ocean acidification, the rising of the seas, the bleaching of the coral reefs, the desertification of already arid lands. So it's trouble. It's trouble all around. But then the IPCC report ends with a call for action, just like it did the previous year, just like they did the year before that, going all the way to the 70s when we started to take climate chaos seriously. Why are we doing the same things over and over again? Why do we reduce it to the scale of the individual? Throw out your trash properly, or um, switch off the lights, or don't use plastics. It seems we're stuck and going round and round in circles. And that is cause for alarm. So I want us to think about that for a moment. What is it that we're addicted to? What is it that we keep on repeating instead of addressing the crisis before us? So this is the IPCC report. Like I said, it basically says we must do something about impending demise. Death is in the way. But in a sense, I think we are practicing death. The Anthropocene is the practice of death. It's the embodiment of stuckness, where we don't know how to think about our problems, where we throw technocratic or techno-bureaucratic solutions at the problem, but still there isn't room for, there isn't an expansive politics that does something different beyond what Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk can offer with their billions of dollars. Isn't there something more we can do, right? So I would like us to think about this, and this is at the heart of what I want to say here within the next 15 minutes. And it's that the reason, well, I wouldn't say the reason, but perhaps one of the conditions that keeps us stuck is because we're trying to address this crisis, climate chaos, global warming, pandemics. We're trying to address it without changing shape. Here's what I mean. The human is the crisis. We often think about human beings as separate from the world, or climate chaos as outside of our windows. It's the weather. It's all outside the window. If I can stay in my house and switch off the lights and count my carbon credits, then all is fine. But there is a sense in which it's the shape that we have adopted. It's the nitty-gritty, the molecular, desirous relationships that we hatch every day. It's how we greet each other. It's how our bodies secrete temporalities and time, right? The world isn't outside of us. We are the world in its ongoing practice, right? The nature isn't something outside. Nature is such an unfortunate concept, isn't it? Right? Coming from the Enlightenment. We try to think of nature as that. Peter was taking me through this 2 days ago, and it looked like Jurassic Park. I was like, wonderful. But that's not nature. Nature is this as well. Nature is this. Nature is constantly deterritorializing and upsetting its own algorithms. Nature is not outside. We are nature. But the crisis is one of flow. The crisis is like a body of water trapped in an eddy which has nowhere else to go. I call that crisis the human. Okay? Again, the human is a colonial territory. The human is what Estonians were dragged into by Danish conquerors. The human is what Africans were dragged into by slave ships. That's the human. The human is an entity, a body, a territory, a way of sniffing, a way of sensing, a way of performing, and a way of moving, right? It's the rectilinearity of our bodies, how we look. Like, see how you're seated right now. Everyone, most of us, you all are the saviors, right? But see how all of us are seated. How do we go to work? Like this. How do we go on the computer? Like this. How do we drive to work? It's the rigidity of posture. It's the reason why I love dance. It's the reason why my course is called We Will Dance with Mountains, right? Dance breaks away from the rigidity of posture. Modernity is the rigidity of posture. The Anthropocene is the rigidity of posture, right? The human is the stuckness of our relationships, right? So the crisis isn't something you can throw solutions at. What we need is more than a solution. What we need is to change shape, is to shape shift, is to become something different entirely. Just to help us think about this, I use this metaphor, and I've been sharing this with my brother Hassel and Peter. Has anyone here seen a death spiral? A death spiral. Okay, y'all are in the city, so you probably don't know what a death spiral is. Another name for it is ant milling, ants, right? And I'll tell you what it is. If you've ever seen ants going in circles before, have you ever seen that? They just go in circles. Anyone here seen that? They go round and round and round in circles. That's called a death spiral. Why is it called a death spiral? It's because they die in those circles. It's what happens is the ants get trapped in a pheromone trail. You know, they secrete pheromones to guide them. And they're blind. I mean the army ants. So they get stuck in that circle and they keep going round and round it, and they're unable to break out of the circle. So they keep telling themselves, just keep going, we're almost at home. You can do it. I'm sure they have motivational speakers, you can do it, you can make it, but they die there. They keep going around for hours and hours, and then they get exhausted, and then they die in the circle. What does that remind you of? I think, if I was telling Hassel that I have a name for what we do that resembles what ants do. I call it anthro-milling. Not ant-milling, but anthro-milling. We do our own running around in circles. We have our motivational speakers, right, that tell us you can do it. All we need to do is just keep forging forward. By 2025, Elon Musk will take us to Mars, and then we'll be able to address the climate crisis, and then we go around in circles and we repeat the same things over and over again, and then we create veteran activists who regret their lives being in activism, and then we die off. I think what we need is a break. We need a break from sensorial capture. The death spiral is a form of sensorial capture. It contains the senses. That's what modernity is. Modernity is the imprisonment of sensoriality. Death is not a threat of climate chaos. Sensorial capture is the threat. Right? In fact, death would be, to me, death is not a final point. My cosmologies think of death as of dance, as a different kind of dance. So death is not even the final bus stop. It's capture. We're captured, we're contained by shopping malls and parking lots and the ways that we greet each other and see the world. So how do ants break away from this? If you're asking that, how do they come out of that? They don't, right? And I needed to say they don't fast because I put they don't there. It's no longer a surprise. They don't break away from it. Not by themselves, at least. The only way that you can break an ant out of that sensorial trap is maybe if you stick your foot there, right? But there's another way that it happens that is, you might say, without human intervention, quite instructive. And I was telling Hasso about this as well. They get infected. So that picture is of something that is no longer an ant, something that is no longer animal, but is a hybridized creature, something between ant and plant, no longer able to fit within our categories of reasoning. You know Attenborough, what's his name? Richard Attenborough, right? Is it Richard Attenborough? David Attenborough with his beautiful British voice. Let's think of the ant. And, that's exactly how he would follow that. He calls it, or they call it, biologists call it, the zombie ant. The zombie ant is when a fungal entity called Ophiocodiceps unilateralis infects by sporulation insects around it, including the ants. And what they do, what happens is that when a spore settles into an ant's body, it takes over everything. It corrupts it takes over everything, all its nervous systems, its limbs, you know the cartoon Ratatouille, Ratatouille? And how the rat was controlling, yes, exactly like that. And then they leave the brain intact. So the ant knows that it has been possessed, so to speak. And then something happens. The ant breaks away from whatever trap it's in, and it wanders away. And then it goes somewhere to die, right? It goes somewhere. It doesn't even die. It becomes, death isn't what happens here. I don't think it's death, because this death is stunningly and surprisingly generative. I don't know if I can classify it as death, right? What happens is that something starts to grow out of the ant's head, and it becomes a new satellite for fungal reproduction, right? The ant, or the zombie ant, is no longer a subject of the ant world. It is now a subject of what I call the Paraterranean, right? The Paraterranean is my name for the hidden public, right? It's a milieu. It's a landscape of monsters. Right? It's a parallax of limbs. I'm using words that may not be too familiar for non-English speaking folk. But I only have 30 minutes. What can I do? So I cannot explain what a parallax is, but when we move and posture our bodies in ways that our perspective changes, that's what I mean by parallax. It's a place-making gesture, right? The Paraterranean is the sidling public that disrupts the flatness of the norm. It's the crease. Again, let's go back to Van Appengen. When Van Appengen squeezes flatness and creates heels, those heels, the spaces between them, between the flatness, is the Paraterranean. It's the place that we're invited to lose our colonial imbrications with the Anthropos. I think the only way we can address climate chaos is if we get infected. Well, not to become zombies. Are you watching The Last of Us? Are you watching The Last of Us? Come on, you guys, watch movies. Movies, they're good things. The Last of Us is sci-fi, is wonderful. A beautiful take on the zombie genre. Well, I think we need to get infected. By infection, I mean we need to lose our way. My elders say, in order to find your way, you must lose it. You must. In order to meet yourself as if for the first time, you must stray away from the algorithms of capture. What I think we need is to come alive to other ways of being in the world. And we need a politics. The Anthropocene is too tiny. It's too impoverished, too skinny a space to do the kind of work that the world is inviting us to do. We need something larger. I won't have time to talk about the Paraterranean in its fullness, and I don't even know what it is in its fullness. I just know that it disrupts the categories of pure thought, and it disrupts bodies as unto themselves. We need to become hybridized in a kind of way that makes us alive to what the world is doing. So I will end with this, with a question. What kinds of textures and relationalities abide beyond the anthropos? What smells are available when we lose our sense of urgency? When clock time isn't the dominant temporality? What other meanings and voices are available? I remember sitting with a shaman. We won't call them shamans. We call them babalawos. And I remember sitting with him, and I was doing my PhD. This was 12, 13 years ago. And he said, I was asking about auditory hallucination. And I remember asking, so what do you do to cure someone or to help someone, to treat that ailment? And I remember him looking at me like, why would you want to cure that? Like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with this bio? Like, why would you want to cure auditory hallucination? What if that's your grandmother? What if that's your grandfather trying to speak with you? What if that's an elder trying to reach you? To him, it was fascinating that I thought of thoughts as belonging to me or us. To him, thought is public. There is no private self. And what me, as a clinical psychologist, I have learned to pathologize and put in the DSM manual, to him, it was communal work. It was an invitation for community to hold space for all the ruptures we're always experiencing and that we always need to experience in order to make sense of things. So he was fascinated. That's the Paraterranean, the world beyond the city, the world beyond, not just the city, even within the city, the world beyond modernity, the world that queers our categories. That's the Paraterranean, and that's where I think we can frame a politics of response to climate chaos. Thank you for listening. Three, two, 1, 0. Yes.
Very precise.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we have
questions. Yes.
Now we have two options.
That's part of the contract.
You have two options: either to give questions to Bayo, or to answer questions that Bayo has posed to us.
That's an enticing prospect. But I will listen to your questions, if there are any, or comments. Yes.
One moment. The microphone is reaching already.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk. I have a question. What is this drawing on the screen right now? And how is it? Yeah.
I was hoping you would ask. In post-Second World War, there was a movement to save children from the asylum, right, in France. French psychotherapists and psychiatrists, Tosquelles, Jean-Henri, Fernand Deligny, these visionary thinkers thought that fascism was repeated in asylums, right? It was a time of death and hunger and suffering. So they found a way to devise the asylum as a community project. One specific individual called Fernand Deligny, like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, led children away from the asylum and took them to a remote part of southern France, Cevennes, I think it's called. And they established visionary, renegade, fugitive communities where the idea wasn't to rehabilitate autistic children, to fix them, to make them good, it wasn't that. It was to accompany them. It was to stay with them, right? So part of their project of staying with these children was tracing how they moved in the camps. So they would they would follow them. The idea was, and these children were non-verbal, they didn't speak. But they didn't try to drag them like sit here or something, or this is how to behave, right? I'm still learning, my child is autistic. I'm learning how to be in that space, right? So they would trace how they're moving, not to build a map of the place, but just to be with that moment. They would trace them. These are the maps that they made. There are hundreds of them, right? They would just trace how they're moving through the landscape. Now, here's the fascinating thing. Fernand Deligny called these lines wandering lines. Lane there, right? Doesn't go anywhere. It's non-instrumental. It's not meant for anything. But they later found out that the autistic children, as they were walking and seemingly doing nothing, were actually tracing out with their walking the underground movement of water. They could hear it. They could hear it. No one else could hear it, right? They were in touch with senses in the environment. They were in touch with worlds hidden that our neurotypical minds are unable to be in touch with. That is the Paraterranean. It's an invitation to lose our way and accompany the monster, the one that has been pathologized, the one that has been pushed aside, excluded. Our work is to stay with them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Not so much of a question, but rather a comment.
Okay.
There is this artist called Clive Parker, and he has made comic books and films, most notably Hellraiser, and Hellraiser Part 2.
Hellraiser?
Hellraiser, yeah.
Hellraiser, okay.
Mm-hmm.
He sounded familiar.
There is an entity in his universe called the Leviathan. And the Leviathan existed for a long time. And the Leviathan was essentially an embodiment of mathematical order. And then life sprung up, and life started to invade like this Leviathan's territory, and he started fighting back by unleashing essentially the forces of hell. The thing that I'm trying to say here is that it kind of resonated with what you were saying, that we tried to impose ourselves on the illusion of order. Yeah. However, the order itself is not heaven as we have been taught, it's rather hell.
I like that.
But thanks for the speech, it was very inspiring.
Thank you very much. Clive Parker, his name is? Barker. Okay, I will check him out. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Quite appropriate. We need to sing more in context.
Thank you. One thought that came in mind was that we as people, we always want to do things and develop. So when you were talking about all those things, I was thinking that if we could just stop doing this, or at least half of it, what we are doing, then all this death road wouldn't even be here. Because even now, when we are talking about solving the problem, we are still always talking about doing something new, choosing a new road. But the best thing would be just stop. Thank you.
Right. I get to me, where we stop, I think his name is Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry once had something to say about this. He said, the impeded stream is the one that sings. That is, again, the impeded stream. The stream that has no impediments, no obstacles, it doesn't sing. The one that has rocks in its way, impediments, that's the one that you hear the beautiful springy sounds and rushing, frothing sounds from. Wisdom is where we stop. Wisdom is where the world says, no, you shall go no further. Where you're trying to build a highway and there's a tree there. That's wisdom. Or in India, which happens all the time, you're speeding along and you summarily come to a cow in the middle of the highway. Yes, that's wisdom. And everyone has to go around it because you're not going to convince the cow to move out of your way. Wisdom is where we stop. The thing is, we are quite habituated in our knowledge-making practices. Right? Solutions come from the energies and the resources and the epistemologies of modernity. So we're trying our best to solve stuff. And that means going around. It's very hard to stop until something stops us. Right? Someone has to break the sensorial trap, the trance we're in. Because even our attempts to address this crisis is part of the crisis. Right? So we need something to stop. Think about all the nice things we said about what we're going to do with the Paris Accords, right? Oh, we're going to we're going to reduce this, we're going to do that, everybody's nice. Obama took many pictures, all of that. But nothing happened. Well, I wouldn't say nothing happened, but the things that happened only served to reinforce the crisis. Denmark, last year, took $170,000 to get tractors remove plastic from its ocean. Plastic and debris from the beaches. Right? It did that. The tractors cleared everything. Yay for climate change or climate justice. And then the tractors dumped the thing back into the ocean. So when my big brother there said, stupidity, that's it. Because the papers came out with that same headline, that this municipality in Denmark is stupid. But that stupidity is not native to any one place. We are caught up. The death spiral is a stupid circle. This is not to diminish it. It's to say we are impervious to new directions. We don't know how to change until something steps in the way. Now think about what the virus did. In 2020, a virus came and everybody went home. It wasn't easy, but we're indoors. Think about what that did this just a single infinitesimal thing. Think about how that changed everything, right? We're still living in the pandemic world that the coronavirus invented. I think we need something more than human to disrupt the continuity of the human. And then when that happens, when a crack emerges, our politics should be to sit around that crack and listen to the crack and decorate the crack and dance with the crack. And maybe we will change as well. So you're right, we need to stop, but we don't know how to. Yeah. Okay, one last one before my plane leaves in a few minutes. One last question.
So I will be the last. Hi. My question is about your personal methods of making you imperfect. Which are the favorite ones for yourself?
My personal methods of making me, I didn't even need to make me imperfect. I am stunningly imperfect. Very imperfect. Ask my daughter.
So you are lucky. You don't have to do anything.
I don't have to. I'm very, very, she could tell you a story. That's my daughter right there smiling at me. I'm very imperfect. When she was born, I wrote a book about her birth and how I would love to create or recreate everything for her. The book is called These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, and it's essentially a prayer to spirits and ancestors to create a world that she can thrive in. I'm still on that course. The book is not finished, even though it's published and has been published for years now. I'm still on that course together. And now I have a son. He's on the autistic spectrum. He's 5 years old, and he's teaching me about myself. And there are difficult lessons. There is no time to go through that now, but I'm on that journey. I will never arrive. This is an invitation to fail generously. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
See you another time. Okay?
Thank you, Bayo. Thank you for empowering us, and thank you for making the work of Vanapagan. You really did it well. And here are some Estonian folk tales for you.
Oh man, yes. This is what I want. This is what I came for. Thank you.
Have a good flight.
Thank you.
Have a good trip.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful spring, summer, autumn, and winter.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.